Priest off in the long term. I think a lot of it comes down to armor management from the Warrior, from Silent Storm here from Bulgaria. Because you will take a beating in the early game, and your health total is not very important because Italy have the opportunity to Alexstrasza you with their control priest. Right. So while you're still in the phase of the game where you are taking hits from minions and swinging your Blood Razor into minions and just leaving a minion up on board to try and get a better brawl later on. Essentially, whenever there's implied threat of you taking damage, you don't want to be stacking armor on top of that because you want to be taking that to your health. And then later in the game, when you've gained board control, which you probably will at some point, the priest will run out of threats. That's when you go for like your big, what's that? Dry Whisker Armor? Is that the name of the card?
Yes.
Yeah, when you go for your big armor return with like Cornered Sentry, it's when you drop your shield blocks and you just try and stack as much armor as you can on top of that health total. That gives you the time that you need to not just die to Mind Blasts.
So I guess a big question for Priest, because in order to get to that late game win condition, is what do they want to do with the Shadow Visions? Because if the Warrior is gaining a ton of armor, then they'll want as many Mind Blasts as possible. But are there other tools that they need in order to even get to that stage in the game?
Yes. It depends, again, on game state. Shadow Visions is not a card that you'll often see cast too early in this matchup because you might need, for example, to take a Divine Hymn because you recognize you're on the defensive and it'll be an extra turn against threat of hero powers. You might need to take a Divine Hymn because your hand is low on value and you have a Pyromancer in your hand. And then suddenly you can go for a big explosive Divine Hymn card draw turn with the Nausea Cleric. But of course, yes, the vanilla option is still true. When you're playing against a deck that can be very resilient in terms of health gain, maxing out on Mind Blast is your plan A.
I suppose that the Priest also has more aggressive minions in most cases than the Warrior. Again, every minion that has the keyword Taunt tends to have slightly worse stats compared to its mana cost. Whereas the Priest, we've got Twilight Drakes, we've got Cabal Shadow Priests that are just stealing these taunts potentially and using them against Silent Storm. So the ability to deal a lot of chip damage in between now and the end of the game is actually there.
And that goes back to the point I made initially, where you kind of have to accept that that beating is going to happen. Yep. You have to kind of ride the ragged edge for as long as you can, and then trust that you will stabilize eventually, because you will. You do have enough removal to get control of the board, and at that point, that's when you start to bounce back with all the armor gain.
In the meantime, the Warrior deck is pretty slow. Turn 3, Dark Reaper or Stonehill Defender.
Dark Reaper sounds wise here. Just try and make sure that the Cleric is only taking, is taking 3 damage by poking in as opposed to the Stonehill Defender. Also gives you a little bit more information as to what you want to take off your Stonehill if you play it on turn 5, as it seems here.
Getting 2 draws though, Italy taking advantage of that. And
there is that Pyro Shadow Visions combination I was talking about as well, which can make real magic happen if you find a Divine Hymn in there.
Bulgaria pretty much going to have to play this Blood Razor here to clear up one of those Northshire Clerics, because Skak drawing through his deck as quickly as possible is just going to allow him to find that damage, find the Death Knight hero. This is not a matchup that's going to go to fatigue very often. So draw is good.
Draw good.
Draw good.
I do wonder. There is maybe an argument for Saronite Chain Gang. Because you can only kill 1 Cleric, right? They're going to draw cards next turn if they want to anyway. And actually 1 card is about right for Italy here. Like, if they start drawing 2 a turn, they can get in a mess. So I wonder, like, how much value Blood Razoring down 1 Nausea Cleric for the sake of interrupting your taunt curve really gives you here. Yeah, I'm really not surprised to see this. You seem baffled.
No. I'm just counting and double checking because you're right. Skak is going to find it very difficult to find the hand space to draw the 2 cards, and he now doesn't really have the ability to draw 1. Well, he could if he wanted to do something crazy like Pyromancer, coin, trade in the 1/2 Cleric, and then heal up the other one. But that's just a mess of a turn.
Right. And also, there's the other side of that argument where you say that, well, if my opponent is going to spend another 2 mana on healing this turn, do I really care about that, right? They're just kind of letting me walk away with this game, just playing taunts happily. They're not playing Twilight Drakes. They're not playing big minions that I need to deal with.
Oh, this is really interesting. Using Twilight Acolyte the other way around. Usually use it to reduce another minion's attack. In this instance, lending its attack to the Northshire Cleric to clean up that Sao Knight Chain Gang.
Right.
Now here, I'm coining out the hero power, meaning that he does have the hand space. This is really interesting way of going about this this odd board state.
It is. It's an unconventional start. And there is that Dustbreaker, though. That can be huge in the matchup just to get rid of any annoying board states like the kind of one we're going to look at here. But now what I will say is if Silent Storm committed to the line of just playing taunts and ignoring clerics last turn, does he continue to do so? I wouldn't call it directly contradictory to like Bloodrazor up this turn and clear the board, because it's a better clear this turn than it was last turn, right? So you can definitely make the argument.
There's also the fact that Italy no longer have the coin in hand, so freely using up cards to make hand space is becoming less of an option over time, which would be an argument to not do this. However, he's gone ahead, dealt with the clerics, said, Team Italy, you've drawn far too many cards by now. Don't want to let this keep going. Italy down to 16 cards left in their deck after this draw already. There's not really much going on the board at the moment, is there?
There's not. It's still, though, even in a very innocuous situation, that isn't the easiest turn in the world. Twilight Drake is one of your biggest threats, and thank you, Hearthstone Gods, for illustrating the point I was about to make. It's one of the biggest threats that you have left in your deck, and you're playing it into a turn with a ready-made Execute activator on the board with the second charge of the Bloodrazor. The only other really proactive play that Italy had, and proactive plays is what they want to be making in this matchup, was just a Duskbreaker away the board, and all that does is just leave a 3/3 in play that just kind of sits there anyway, you know, like it gets dealt with by the Bloodrazor on top of that. So it wasn't any improvement over the Twilight Drake, so I definitely can't fault them for playing it out here.
Interesting that they've opted to go with the Stonehill Defender rather than the Execute, though. If they were going to go the Execute route, typically they'd hit with the weapon first so that the Stonehill Defender doesn't take damage, but instead they're just loading up on taunts rather than dealing with the Twilight Drake.
Right. It's a real scary Cabal Shadow Priest turn.
It's okay. It's not completely board changing, though, is it? Like, you take a 2/2, you take a 1/4.
I would describe a, what, 5, 9, 6, 13 swing in stats as quite board changing.
Okay.
Did I do that right? You get a 5/9, your opponent loses a 1/4, 6/13.
Sure. I'm just looking at how awkward the Tar Creeper is to deal with still. That's still, like, sure, it's a good-sized board, but it's not dealing any damage anytime soon.
How's that for armor gain?
That's a lot of armor gain.
But again, this is the point that I was really trying to hammer home early on, is it too early? Are you going to build that armor up and just have Italy beat it down with minions? Because that's not in the position you want to be in. It's also not the ideal Cornered Sentry, Dryusk Armorer into Brawl turn, is it? That's usually how you see those cards used. But there's no Brawl present and no mana to play that card. I was going to say, there are several problems with that plan.
I mean, what's the alternative? One Cornered Sentry, Dryusk Armorer, hit him with the Bloodrazor? It's not horrible. It's not good, though, is it? What is good is that we're already at 4 out of 7 on the quest, and these two Cornered Sentries will raise it up to 6 out of 7.
Yeah.
Bulgaria actually closer than they look.
Right. I like this, the halfway play. So like I said, if you just go ahead and like double Cornered Sentry and just gain the armor, you're leaving so much board presence on the opponent's side of the board still. Like, yeah, you swing your Bloodrazor and the 1/1s go bye-bye, but they still have that 4/8 Twilight Drake, so their opportunity to start beating away and taking that armor down is still increased. So 1 Sentry and the Execute did seem like the most solid line of play that turn.
This is a scary Cabal Shadow Priest turn.
Sure.
I would rather take a 2-5 with my Cabal Shadow Priest than a 1-4 any day. Again,
Well, I would rather take a 2-100 Falk. Doesn't make this any less good.
I guess Italy don't want the 2-5 anyway, so never mind. They'd probably take the 2-100.
Yeah.
Medicine insects.
Removing everything from the board, it seems pretty good too, given that Bulgaria only have 3 cards in their hand. As we can see, still aren't quite there in terms of completing the quest, and Skak has just got the next few turns free to start dumping big minions onto the board.
And this is exactly one of the subjects that we covered in our quite extended little interlude as we were waiting. I think one of the players lost internet connection for a second. That's a log back here.
Right.
That's why it took so long to get into this game. But as we were talking about in the middle, the deck can run out of value now, right? It doesn't incrementally snowball card draw in the way that the old Quest Warrior used to do, right? Where you played one Battle Rage and that drew you your shield block, and then your shield block drew your Curator, and then once you've played Curator, you're set for the game, just because of how explosive the cards that you draw are. But with Silent Storm here, he can very easily run out of value because he, I believe, only plays a single copy of Battle Rage. 2 Acolytes are paying down those 2 shield blocks.
And when you don't draw any of those 5 cards, then yeah, your hand probably is going to get a little bit dry at some point. Psychic Scream is somewhat interesting to me right now, because the idea of shuffling 3 1/1s into a deck that's struggling to draw their cards does seem a little bit appealing.
Interesting is precisely the word I would use. It was... I talked about this. If anyone watched the pre-show, I think, again, it's kind of that scenario of experienced Hearthstone players could perhaps think that was the best play because it's cute. It seems advanced, right? It seems like an advanced thing to do to put 3 Raptors into your opponent's deck. But actually what you're doing is giving up all your board pressure right now, which is much, much more important.
Italy really holding on to that other Cabal Shadow Priest as well. They had the option to just take a 2/6 there outright. What do you think they're holding on to it for?
It's a great question. They do still have, I believe, 1 Twilight Acolyte left remaining, right, that they can use to take away anything that they want. It also they might be considering it too much value in a single card to add here and play into a Brawl, for example. And just using it as a refill later on, because it's likely that Silent Storm somewhere along the line has a play where they brawl and play their own taunt minion, or they brawl after Sulfurous and play their own taunt minion. So yeah, it wouldn't be of any great surprise to see something slightly larger stolen, or with that Cabal Shadow Priest. But again, second Booty Bay Bodyguard from Stonehill Defender of the day.
I am entirely lost for words there.
Did we see the options that time? Because we didn't last time,
Yeah,
right?
it's very, very quick. Nobody ever took
hi.
Nobody ever took Evil Heckler from their Stonehill Defenders. Why does Booty Bay Bodyguard get the special treatment? I mean, earlier it made sense, at least, because it was getting the team one step closer to completing that quest. The quest was complete before, I think on turn 5 or on turn 6 or something. Specifically on a turn that no more expensive taunt would have allowed for. In this instance, I'm really struggling to think of what the other options could have been.
Right.
Okay, so now the game is really getting into overdrive here, as Silent Storm is going to start pressing that button as much as possible. However, Team Italy, they're now going to use this Cabal Shadow Priest, I guess, to help defend against that hero power, and they've also got Alexstrasza and Shadow Reaper Anduin to finish the game very quickly on their own side. Also, double Mind Blast. This might not go on for much longer.
You could be right. And we're also now in the position where once these attacks go through, Italy have exhausted all of that armor gain that Bulgaria amassed with that play earlier with the cornered sentries, because this makes a huge difference now, because if Alexstrasza were to come down later on this same combined total, but some of it was still armor, then Bulgaria just profit from that point.
It looks like a pretty straightforward leaf in a few turns, actually. If we're talking, Shadow Reaper Anduin to set up, then Alexstrasza, and then just double Mind Blast, that should pretty much be the game, unless Silent Storm can A, kill Italy faster than that, or B, gain a ton of armor one more time, which is seeming like it's going to be unlikely.
Could we get away with it?
I think we got away with that.
Luckily, our new Hearthstone Reconnect feature can actually resume game states from where we left off. Otherwise, this would have been a regame all the way from the beginning. But still, you said this could be a pretty straightforward lethal. You did clarify immediately afterwards, but I was about to ask, for which player? Because, you know, you say, oh, okay, well, you know, next turn you Shadow Reaper Anduin, then you Alexstrasza, then you double Mind Blast. That doesn't work too well if Silent Storm is shooting you in the face for 8 every turn in the meantime. Like, do you have the freedom to do that? I don't think you do.
Well, I don't know, because the thing is, Italy can heal for 2 now with the hero power, as the Anduin damage doesn't do anything when you're planning to play Alexstrasza later.
Okay.
So heal for 2, then play the Anduin. So that's back up to 24 again. Take 8, back down to 16. Alexstrasza, take 8 again down to 8, and then it's lethal next turn.
And you have the lethal on the Mind Blast turn.
But actually, I think there might be time.
But 2 shield blocks in deck for Silent Storm, and potentially the second Dry Whisker Armor, I still believe is hanging about, which can mess with that plan, right? They only need to be able to gain 2 from their 15, and then that can potentially disrupt your plan. But you're right, I think Italy are correct to go for it, because it is a route to victory here. And it's honestly, the counter-argument isn't very good, right? It's like, well, why should I slow down trying to kill my opponent when that then gives them more turns to connect hero powers to my face?
They're doing it in a slightly different order than I suggested before, but this just makes more sense because...
Front loads 8 damage.
Yeah, the Alexstrasza either eats up a Fireball, which is fine, or, as you said, 8 damage goes in, then the Double Mind Blast is lethal without having to play Anduin in the first place. So, Silent Storm going to finally use one of his card draw engines. Execute is now playable this turn, so that is another guaranteed 8 damage.
There's some armor gain.
Italy are running Holy Fire though, so Double Mind Blast Holy Fire is something that Bulgaria has to consider but can't really do much about.
Nice little raptors.
Quarter Sentry comes down, essentially threatening lethal on the following turn if Skak doesn't heal, but of course he will, and now of course Divine Hymns come into play as well. It's all getting very spicy, and there is Mind Blast number 3. None of that Anduin nonsense required. Skak even throwing out the emotes. What a cheeky little scamp he is.
Team Italy just asserting their dominance, and quite right too.